So we're back at class, Yonsei's East Asian and International Management. We've covered all of the management theories. We've covered the cultural differences, East-West. Inside here, we've talked about Hofstede, we've talked about Hall, we've talked about Cluckhorn, Schwartz, Globe. We've talked about the art of war, we've talked about Guanxi. We realize all of these are incredibly important. Then we got into Chinese management, what it is, how powerful they are, what are the characteristics. One thing that we did not have great ability to do is spend time on the latest research. This is a new PhD dissertation talking about the latest styles of Chinese management. And in summary, it says that the world knows Chinese management is connected with Confucianism. Well, that's true. But the world generally is not up to date. They learned something when they were very young, and they continue to believe it for their whole life, even though it might be 20 years old. For example, being autocratic or dictatorial, it has changed, and it's fatherly, and more importantly, it has changed with the new people like you, just like you, are now managing companies internationally and in China. Some of you have had education in North America or in Europe or Australia, around the world. And so you've gone abroad, you've got this great education, you've learned these best practices. Some of you have worked for good companies. Then you come back and you manage these companies and you realize the old style was to work just with family. But the new style is sometimes it's better to have professional people coming in. Ownership can still be controlled by family, but the management is now increasingly being done by professional managers. So make sure you're aware of not just the Chinese management, but some of the new research that would be helpful for your future. Last week we talked about future management. Make sure you know all of those details exactly like I showed you on the YouTube video. For example, there's a group on YouTube called YouTube Partners. They have many videos talking about how to use the YouTube tools, how to use Google Analytics, how to use YouTube Analytics or Facebook Analytics. Make sure that you're aware of those. Today we're going to be talking about Korean and Japanese management. After today, we have one more big project that we're going to be talking about, and that's negotiations. And then we are getting ready to be at the end of the semester. We're going to be talking about YouTube videos of what you have found. And we will go through some extra material. If we have time, we will talk about some other things. But make sure you're ready to start presenting your final work. The class is going to make it's going to continue to develop the Facebook group for our class. You know of those details. But the class is also making a YouTube account. So all of you, even if you haven't used YouTube to upload videos before, make videos on the internet, maybe you only watched videos, you can come into the class group and upload your videos following the keyword tools for the titles and the description and the key tags, and put your projects up there. We're also going to have summaries of how to make those proper videos, like that last video I just showed you should be here. Please make sure you're aware that we are almost at the end of the term, almost at the end of the semester. If you have extra material that you want to present or extra projects you want to deal with, start talking to me about it as soon as possible and prepare to reserve your time. So, next. We have covered, obviously, the theories from Maslow, Herzberg, McGregor, economic, environment, open comparative management models. We've talked about how the United States took a long time, 100 years, to move from agrarian to the modern industrial society. Japan, 70 years. Korea has done it incredibly fast. We talked about the percent of international management studies in the US, like of 11,000 international management studies in top journals around the world, mostly in the United States. Less than 1% really have consideration of work by people from more than one country, in more than one country. So a lot of people must learn about international management and this high-tech big data usage. You learn those, your future should be a lot better. Then we went in and we talked about the 2 million minutes and the big differences in international education and how that's driving changes around the world. You know that there's a huge need to understand most people are born with either ethnocentric views or parochial views which are out of date, and you must be more synergistic, globally competitive. We talked about the various ways to classify details. Then we got into the charts that showed what these theories are, like this. Of course, you must understand who is Hofstede, who exactly is Hofstede, how his long-term orientation is a little bit confusing, how his studies talking about masculinity and femininity have been basically retitled as career orientation and quality of life by a Canadian researcher from McGill University, Nancy Adler. You should be aware of Hall, understanding that he classified people around the world just according to high context and low context. Cluckhorn and Strodbeck, what he classified the world as. Trompenar, how he classified different management styles around the world. Schwartz and the Globe Project, all of these can be on the final exam. We talked about the art of war and many different features of the art of war, how that's important. We talked, these are some of the details of art of war. And now we're getting into Korean and Japanese management. Obviously, we're based in Korea. We should know more about the Korean management than any other type of management in the world. Many of you have been in Japan. Some of you might be from Japan. So you should have more of an understanding of this than anything. Please make sure you know the basics. Please make sure you understand how things are changing incredibly fast. For example, most of the world knows Japan grew really, really fast, and they introduced Toyota into the North American market and globally, and that concept of making a whole new product changed the world. Previously, General Motors and Ford, they made big, expensive cars. Giant GM trucks, giant Ford trucks, the giant Cadillac luxury vehicles. And there were very giant price tags on each of those. And the world thought, at least in North America, the parochial view was the world in North America thought that was the best you can get, that was normal, that was all you could do. Then, out of nowhere, Japan started to provide their new cars, which were high quality at low price everywhere in the world. And so these high-priced North American cars had to drop in significant price to match what the Japanese were doing. Some studies were saying, for example, when GM and Ford started making cars, it took them on average, even though they had billion-dollar buildings making these cars and many, many workers making these cars, it took on average 60 days to make each car. 60 days of billion-dollar buildings and equipment and many, many workers working in this. Then all of a sudden Japan came around and they made the cars, which are basically half price or a lot cheaper and more reliable, higher quality in 2 days. So North American management style was 60 days, Japan did it in 2 days. So that's one of the things we're looking at. And the world with management theories, they were saying, how is this possible? And they realized that the Japanese inventory system and the Japanese distribution system was very, very important. And then we started to realize how not just the just-in-time or the Japanese inventory system, but the idea of the Japanese went following a Z format, but it's generally going this way from the bottom, then it's going up to the top, to the CEO. So the management theories of the Z management theories are showing that everybody has input in management in Japan. But they showed that since everybody is working like this, it goes very, very slow. And they were saying that Japan, because of this good thing but it's really, really slow. That's why Japan basically died in the 1990s, and they didn't really develop since then. What are your comments when somebody says Japan died in the 1990s? What should you know about management? What should you know about the world? What should you know about general operations? Has Japan died? The video can't hear this. I know in Korea the uncertainty avoidance to talk is one thing, but you have to learn the international management style. So please communicate. As Hall says, overcome the high context, low context. Many people are saying that they're taking too much time and so they've basically stopped. That's right. For more than a decade, they slowed down. But what is happening recently? Are they still dead? Are they still slow? They have started to grow quite well recently. Things are growing quite well. Make sure you're aware of these things. And a big reason, big consideration with differences in management is while North American managers supposedly are praising the best management in North America is these big public corporations where anybody can invest in them. They're on the stock market. You have these professional CEOs going in there, and the professional CEOs are supposed to be listening to the investors in what you're doing, and the board of directors. People realize that that seems good, and it might be good on paper, but there are flaws with that system also. For example, those CEOs, yes, they have the investors that give them the money, like Apple has billions and billions of dollars that people pay to own the company, but it has almost no impact on the management. It doesn't really impact even the CEO's salary. Laws state that the CEOs in North America have to allow the investors to vote on key management decisions, like the CEO's pay, over $1 million a year. But unfortunately, the loopholes in the law are special in that the CEO can say, yes, you can vote. This is going to be my salary that I'm proposing. We can vote on it. That's the law. But the law does not say the CEO has to listen to you. So you go ahead and vote, but I'm taking that CEO pay anyway. Same thing with the operations. And then you say, well, the investors, they are basically represented by the board of director advisors that control me and hire me. However, who actually hires those board of directors? The CEO. And those CEOs many times pick people that are friendly and cooperative to the CEO's interests. And so if I'm going to be paying them big salaries, they're going to be taking the ideas that I give and saying, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. Alternatives, you can have proxy votes, but proxy votes rarely ever win. More importantly, they're saying that they're focused on the future. They're planning for the future. They're ready with the world's best technology is what they're saying. And they're going to have this great future, but what is the reality? The actual workers or the top executives in North America, they do still want to impress the investors to invest more because that's easy money. So they're trying to manage this quarter of the year, these 3 months or 4 months, just to impress the investors. So although they're saying they have long-term plans and they're managing for the long term in the future, they're generally just looking at the next quarter or maybe just this next year. Japan is very different. As it says here, there is less consideration of the shareholders. Japan, Korea, and China are more focused on the family. And it doesn't have to be by blood. In Japan, it's a very different sense of family. What is the difference between family in Korea and family in Japan and family in China? All related to business. What are those differences? You should know. Any comments? In Korea, the easiest answer is Korea. It's basically blood, just blood. And it's not just blood, it has to be pure Korean blood. A lot of families basically discourage a child marrying somebody from outside of Korea. And the people that have these big businesses usually try to give the business to their children. So it's just blood, 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 and it's following the same name. In Japan, it's different. They have had a lot more access to the international movement of professionals and managers. So Japan is allowing these companies to take the world's best managers coming in, and if you are loyal, and if you're staying with the family for lifetimes, for example, and proving your quality, even though you're not my blood child, not my blood family, in Japan, you are considered the family. You're basically adopted just by showing your loyalty and your characteristics. In China, it's not just by coming from other areas and staying with me to manage. In China, family is also considered anybody from the geographic region where I came from. Anybody that has the Guanxi with serious ties, whether it's the university ties, the school ties, the city ties, the high school ties, middle school, elementary school, all of those ties open the Chinese family to a broader range. Make sure you understand those details. It enables more focus, especially in Japan, on the long-term consequences, because we want the business to grow very well for our family, for our kids, and our grandkids. Versus in North America, it's less society-based, it's less group-oriented, it's less collectivist-oriented, as we talked about here. And it's in North America, it's just the individual detail. That CEO is looking at the individual stock price that they can get, or the individual profit that they might be able to get. It's quite a bit different. And of course, after the war, things did change. Japan did several things that the world might not have approved of many, many years ago, back in the 1900 or during the Korean War. But with World War II and the Korean War, the United States military came over and basically took power out of Japanese control, where it was just the family ownership of businesses, and a few families controlled the whole countries. And they said that you have to diversify and allow ownership of the company to be spread out in many ways. Like a net or like a spider web. You have to have the ownership spread out. And they did that to satisfy the Americans, saying, do this. However, the reality is, although they spread out ownership, the ownership was going to another corporation that's in my name, and then another corporation in my name. And there's basically cross-shareholding. So I own the shares in this company that owns this company. And I own and control the shares in this company that owns this. So my interest in controlling this, plus my ability to invest and control this, plus my ability to invest and control this, and this, all come together with the cross-shareholding in Korea and with the Chinese family and in the Japanese organizations, so that they can still control the management. Leadership and decision-making. Anybody want to comment on this, this system? Going once, going twice. Okay, there are some key features with the Japanese management style and the Korean management style. You guys are all aware of the Sanbei Hubei, the older, the younger person. There has to be a relationship. It's based on Confucianism. Basically, the older person has to take care of the younger person. And the younger person has to take care of the needs for the older person. There's a special relationship in Korea with those words we just identified, the senior and the junior. Same thing in Japan. They also have similar things that are related to that. With the Ringi system, it impacts the decision making. They have the Nemawashi, which is preparing the ground. There's a bunch of different processes that are important to understand. We're going to be talking about that soon. Overall, the culture environment is just like the Confucian system. It's based on harmony, the essence of Japanese life. You're not supposed to be arguing. You're supposed to be very, very polite. The decisions are made for friendly cooperation. A lot of non-Japanese going into Japan misunderstand when they're having the contract negotiations. Here's a contract for $1 million to buy your business. Everything okay? And you'll hear people saying, yes, yes, yes. So the contract's good? Yes, yes. Well, that's based on the harmony and the decisions, keeping the family happy, not making anybody feel bad. It doesn't mean, yes, we have a contract. It means, yes, I understand your question. And that goes in Korea, Japan, and China. Korea and China are moving more away from that. It's a little bit more global-minded than the Japanese strict adherence to face, but we need to understand that. There's informal surroundings of employees' ideas. There's the democratic method, which might take longer time. We have these features of the Japanese management style. Here we see the Nemawashi is, would one of you like to read this first line, please?
Encourage the suggestions from the bottom level, and the top is the person remain denominator.
Okay. So that's what we're talking about here again. And sometimes you're encouraging people throughout the organization in the bottom level to make suggestions to how to improve the quality or improve the management. And it's going back and forth, and there's so many people going through hundreds or thousands of employees that you basically remain anonymous. And the next key feature of the Ringi system is the Ringi Seido. Ingyu, would you like to read this section? Yes.
And then the comment on the back of the proposal. Well, democracy at lower levels can initiate proposals or workshops and limit the danger of the system being manipulated by certain individuals. Generally, access people efficiently.
Okay. Please make sure you're aware of these things. There is a negative side of it, and it's saying, for example, there's too many people and the sections get involved. There may be too many meetings. The idea that you have to be very, very polite and you shouldn't contradict your senior, you shouldn't argue too much with your senior, it might slow things down. A lot of people have been identifying those problems, especially since Japan slowed in the 1990s. This is just identifying negative features. Since this is an international English management textbook, there's going to be a lot of English views in here. A lot of English views will be coming from North America, so there's going to be a lot of comments that are negative, and these are some of the negative views, but they might not be entirely accurate. For example, a parochial North American view saying my way is good and this way is interesting, but there's a lot of problems with it, might be because they're not properly understood. So if we go back and we look at it, here's more of the actual definition, and it's saying some of these details. There are bottom-up levels, which it sounds like the North American management style. Anybody can make suggestions to the CEO in the Western world. In Japan, it sounds like that. But there are differences. For example, in the Western world, you'll have the big CEO here, and lots of people here, directors, maybe one vice president, and you can have this guy making a suggestion right to the top. However, in Japan, you don't have that sense or that ability to go straight to the top, because you're supposed to respect your hierarchy. And so all of these guys collectively, group-orientedly, they share these ideas amongst themselves. When they agree it's a good idea, then it goes to the next level, and the next level of managers will talk about it, discuss it, agree it's a good idea, and we might not even know where it came from. Maybe it came from this guy, but as a group, this guy in the Japanese and the Korean system usually don't put their name on it. They'll just give that proposal to their boss, and they'll put maybe their boss's name on it. And these guys will put their boss's name on it when they give it to them. So then it comes up to the top, and everybody, it's basically going up, but you don't know it's coming directly from this person. And with the management differences, These guys know different things than these guys, and so these managers might reshape that question with different words. Maybe it's more sophisticated words or more higher level management words. And these top level of managers will do the same. And so these guys might speak a whole different type of language, not a country language, just like a dialect that the CEO does. The CEO is such a high level, such technology, such sophisticated details that these comments generally have to be translated by the time they get up here. And they're translated as they go through each level of management. The Shinge Shiseido, what this is talking about is it's similar in the sense that lower levels can initiate these proposals, and it reduces the danger of decision being manipulated by certain individuals by going back and forth. It's generally saying that all of these things are going through the group, not just from the bottom level up. So everybody is agreeing and having impact on these things. And a big thing to think about is the family again. Family concept, family concept, family concept. You're not just looking at your family, your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister. Your country, your society, your whole community is the family in many senses. And so there's many people involved. Many unnecessary questions and suggestions, inefficient way of time managing, delaying the business. These are popularly discussed Western concepts. So, what are some of the US career perceptions and the Japanese perceptions? In Japan, another thing is you'll have the ultimate goal. You can move back and forth here. You can go from this department to this department to this department, and if you get a promotion, you can still go back and forth in these departments. By the time you get up here, you should have been able to work with almost all of these other departments. And you have experience and understanding of the whole business in many ways. And in Chinese government operations, it might be the same. A lot of powerful government officers or powerful managers, especially for state-run enterprises, they've had to prove they've done all of these different things. For example, they've worked in these various departments inside cities. And then they move from one small city to a bigger city, managing bigger projects and different types of projects. And only after they've proved those capabilities, then they can get into the federal levels or the top levels of state-owned enterprise management. So it's the broad experience, definitely in Japan, versus in North America. It's a specialist. One individual can make your contribution, and you can talk directly with the CEO and develop a special project for that. This seems to be one reason why the Western world is outsourcing more individual jobs than East Asia. In East Asia, you don't hear of too many Korean companies, you don't hear of too many Japanese companies or Chinese companies, where inside the company, they will take a job and give it to some other expert to do just in 1 hour or 1 day. Versus North America, a lot of people with this future management are outsourcing the jobs through elance or freelancer and online workers for very, very low pay just to get the job done. So they'll have more specialists and more outsourcing in the United States. That is starting to change the world quickly. There's increased mobility. Is there a lot of mobility in Japan, Korea, or China? Why would there not be increased mobility? Or, more importantly, what does it mean, increased mobility? Exactly. People can change their jobs. So having high mobility, is that good or bad? It depends on the cultural difference. In Japan, for example, mobility from inside this company, this is all one giant building, versus North America has a different building. You can move from this department with mobility. You are mobile to go to another department, another department, another department, or a partnering company, like you know that the Korean conglomerates and the Japanese conglomerates or the Chinese state-owned enterprises, they're huge organizations that have many partnering companies or subsidiaries. and you can go back and forth to those. But it's all inside the company. So it's loyal versus here, it's not loyalty. It's just based on the individual expertise that you have. So you can go from here to another company to a higher position, and then you go to another company to a higher position, and then you go to another company, the higher position. This is the East Asian way versus the Western way. This is based on the loyalty, but the loyalty has been changing. As I said, almost everybody knows Confucian values, there's nothing more important than the family, than the filial piety. So you're supposed to respect your father, your mother. You're supposed to be very, very loyal to them. And it's incredibly important. You're going to continue to have that, especially where in China, they only have one child. So of course, there's only a very, very tight family, versus North America, you might have 5 kids or many kids. So this idea is important, but it is changing because he can go to North America for education or work experience, get the training, and then he comes back. And he knows loyalty is very important, but he also knows smart is smart, reasonable is reasonable, and if I have to get somebody to come in and work under me, I will continue to own and control the final decisions, but we can have professional managers getting the job done as best possible. So that's what we're talking about here. Increased mobility in the United States is, it means going to other companies back and forth, versus seniority-based promotion in Japan. You do have mobility inside departments, and to get here, how do you get here? You can transfer departments almost any time. But how do you get to the next level? Yes, Guanxi, yes, definitely helps. It always helps to have connections. You're supposed to be living in a great world where they're just looking at the merits and stuff, but that's not always true. Sometimes you can have somebody that's very, very well qualified that's psycho, so you want to resort to the loyalty of family because family should never let you down. Not always, but yes. You had a question? Okay. Anyway, so to get from here to here, Guanxi helps, but it's not the main answer. Yes? Time, right. The idea of time. You have to put in the years. After so many years, you get a promotion. Everybody gets the chance for a promotion. And then after so many more years, everybody here gets the chance for a promotion. But just the top move up. What happens to the freaks? What happens to the guys that make problems? What happens to the guy that has the psycho work problems? These guys go to the partnering branches in the remote islands, Tokto Islands, or like the North Americans, they'll be sent to work for the franchises in Alaska, for example. They'll still be loyal with the family in Japan, but they're going to be not taking the top roles here. They're sent to some other place. Lifelong employment is still very, very powerful. It's a huge concept in North America. That's why with these management theories, what is this theory? If I just show you this diagram and ask, what is this management theory? You should know. What is this? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is based on the Western views, and in Japan, some people say that the very top is not self-actualization, not self, individual, individual, individual. It's more of the group-oriented. So it would be more related to safety. Safety might be more of a concern over there. So the seniority, the lifelong employment, that is one of the top goals. Versus in North America, again, as I said, with the outsourcing, you'll have short-term employments possible. Promotions just on merit. And some people say, by the time you guys are getting very, very serious into work, or your children's generation, some people say the average length of your job, your lifetime job, Whereas now in Japan, the lifetime job is maybe 30, 40 years. But by the time, in another 10, 20, 30 years, some people say that lifetime is going to be 2 hours. The average length of work experience for everybody in the world might be 2 hours. And that means there's going to be more and more outsourcing. You just get the individual job done by some expert and you learn to manage those differences. So, for example, in Japan, if you're successful after 10 years, you get promoted to the keicho. And after 20 years, you might get up to the bucho. Or in Japan, what's that called? You have the sajangnim, bujangnim, right. Make sure that you're aware of those details. There's the manager, there's the director, there's the president. All of those are important to understand. And here's what we're talking about. The kacho, bucho, sacho. Again, this is similar to the sajangnim in Korea. And here are the numbers where it's talking about it. Huejang, sajang, all of these numbers. The sawan right at the very beginning to the, and you can see these differences. Make sure you understand it, again, because when you're trying to get your job, the higher the connections you have, the more valuable they are at bringing you in. And if you are able to understand, for example, when you're doing your research project, you should be doing most of your research, or when you're managing your business, you start with getting the information down here. Because they do the real work. They know what's really going on. So you can find the real facts in Japan, in China, and in Korea. You should be doing your research projects and your management starting here. But after you find this information, then you move up a level. And you make sure it's approved there. And then you make sure that everything is approved and you can move up a level. That is a great way to work with the loyalty-based system. And it also allows, if you have a problem down here, you can still try to go to the top and go direct with the good, valuable information, knowing that this might not work with some people. So, lifetime employment. Most employees in the system are directly recruited from school. Same in Korea, right? When are big companies recruiting in Korea? What is the month that you can get a job in Korea? Most jobs in Korea have recruiting when?
When?
Yes. What time of year? When is the job applications? Right. Generally, it's once or twice a year, and it's in some ways aligned around the university graduations. So you graduate, and then you'll have some time off, and then you'll start your job. And so the companies work with that. It's a whole community-based. You get your jobs that way. North America is very different. How do you get jobs, or when do you get jobs in North America? In North America, usually you get jobs by being able to apply anytime, having the Guanxi to know when these jobs have openings, or having the Guanxi and the connections, knowing what these projects are working on and what they're doing. And as soon as you know, for example, this guy is sick, you can volunteer to come in and help while they're sick, and if they like your abilities, you might be able to stay on. So it could be any time of year. And there's recruiting whenever there's a job that's needed. Make sure that you understand lifelong job security is very, very important. There's the focus on the abilities and the potential of employees more than just that one person's high IQ. For example, when you go in and you're recruiting at university, when you're recruiting from universities in Korea and Japan and China, a lot of East Asian companies will hire you for your intellect, for your ability to think well, for your ability to act well, more than your ability to know that detail. Sorry, that might be confusing. You need to be able to know things. You need to be able to learn things. You need to be able to do things, but you can get hired without knowing it. Because they are checking for your ability to learn, and then they will train you. The training programs in East Asia are super long compared to training programs in North America, where they just give you, hi, I interview you. The interview might last several weeks or months in North America, but after the interview goes well, here's the company training program, read this, you start work next Monday, and you have to go in and start doing the job from the very first day. Versus in Japan and Korea, you're interviewed because you can walk and talk and you know how to think, you know how to do things, you've proven you have the right talents, and then you're brought into the company and trained. Sometimes those training programs last a very, very long time. Negative side of Japanese lifetime employment, having a much harder time to find a new job. What would be a problem with students? Would you like to work for Sony? Would you like to work for Toyota? It might be great, but one thing you must consider, before you get that job, you should travel first. Because they won't be very happy if you work for a while and then take a couple months off to travel, because they're not going to keep the job. You have been disloyal, you left the family, they're going to fill that job, so you can't get in as easily. So a lot of people, they will travel after the university or during university, because as soon as you get the job, you stay with the company. And a big difference between the Japanese workers and Korean workers is Korean workers still think it's good to travel as much as possible. Even after university, I get a job. The more I travel, the more a Korean person thinks my boss is going to think I'm good because I have this travel experience. I have the ability to understand how they do things in Czech Republic or the Middle East or North America. Versus in Japan, Japanese managers are a little more loyalty-based, focused inside Japan, and if you leave, your job may disappear. So, layoffs in Japan, since layoffs are going to be a lot more infrequent. Definitely a lot more infrequent than in North America. There's a trade-off with opportunities, layoffs, and security because of that concept with the culture. Preferring security, generations are going to make big differences. You understand also that some of Japanese top companies now, for example, are being managed by non-Japanese. Some of the world's best Japanese companies do not have CEOs that are Japanese. There are companies that have a top person that was maybe born in Brazil, trained in London, England, with Portuguese parents, for example. Make sure you understand that idea. Japan is starting to change quite quickly. But senior promotions are still a huge part of it. The natural entitlement to promotion during the long period of service, its merit is based on number of years, less than just your talent. Motivation for employees to stay long in one company, just like in Korea. How does a professor get from being a regular professor, a new professor, to the top of Yonsei University? Generally, the only way, even if you are an Einstein, even if you're publishing some amazing results, is generally through time. You have to show that you're loyal to your organization. However, if you are very, very talented in Japan or Korea and China, they will be taking care of you very, very well. Negative sides of promotions, of the seniority-based promotions. Of course, it's slower for some people. Of course, it's burdensome as seniority grows because you are supposed to take care of more people. You have to not only do your job, you have to be responsible like a father to the people underneath you. Slow economic growth may be a consideration. Another aspect of seniority-based promotions is there may be less innovation. If you have that generation requiring people to get to the top executive levels, that older generation might not have the new ideas of the younger generation. So the innovativeness might be stifled a little bit. Compensation. Employees at a Japanese company share more equally in cash than in the West. The bonus-based systems. Does anybody know of what is an example of a bonus in Korea or Japan? For example, if I'm working for a company and I get a bonus, when do you usually get a bonus in Korea? Or if you get a bonus in Korea or Japan, how much is that bonus? Does anybody know?
At the end of the year.
Usually it's at the end of the year, right? And the bonus value is generally what? Right. It's a percentage, or it's a value times the number of your monthly pay. It's not directly related to the company profit. In North America, the company profit determines a lot of the bonuses. Versus in Korea and Japan, generally they'll just give you not just a 1-month pay bonus, but they might give you 18 months worth of pay as a bonus. The biggest companies, the best companies usually do that. The standard monthly pay is considered very small. But if you are a genius and you're working very, very hard, you might get a bigger bonus than the guy next to you. And you might get your monthly pay at the end of the year with 18 extra months of bonus pay, while the other guy only gets 10 months of bonus pay. Those are some of the differences. So how can you plan to deal with this? I sincerely hope you guys, I'm going to talk about planning for a little while, then we'll take a short break, but I sincerely hope you guys understand you need to start planning to work with this system. You need to start planning to work with all of this immediately. So start thinking, what is your long-term plan, whether it's the 20-year plan or 10-year plan, and then find out what do you need to do in half of that time to get to your final goal, and then what do you need to do in half of that time to get to your final goal, then what do you need to do in half of that time to get to your final goal. I think you've heard this before. And make sure you start getting those final goals, or moving towards those final goals, one step done each day or each week, so you do get there. And of course, every day you're going to have small problems. You have to go meet a friend at a coffee shop because they're crying for some reason. Or you have to go pick up your dry cleaning. Or you have to go take your child for immunizations, or whatever it's going to be. There's a lot of small tasks that you need to plan for each day that you will get in the way of your long-term plans. So you must be able to plan for this. And there's certain things that you must avoid. The bottom of this table, you must avoid these things. Avoid these interruptions, some phone calls, some of the mail, some meetings. Some people will say it's important, but you will need to learn how to avoid that. For example, the busy work, junk mail, some of these phone calls, time wasters. Avoid those. Learn to say no. Or if you're too nice, or if you're like the Japanese, very, very polite, you don't want to say no, learn to say, yes, sure, I'll help you do that as soon as the top things are managed and I've finished those things I must focus on. So the areas that you have to focus on are most important. So you manage a crisis. You manage a medical emergency. You manage these pressing problems, deadline-driven things like your student essays, like your job applications, like your medical checkups or medical problems. But in general, big, long projects you know about for a long time, they're not supposed to be urgent. So you focus on planning for the future and what is creating value. This focuses on, this simplifies the table. Understand what is important and urgent. And never do things that are not important, period. Playing is important. Sleeping is important. Having fun with your friends is important. If you don't do that, you will go crazy. So you have to plan time to have fun and party and be with your friends and sleep and exercise. So put time into Q1. But of course, you must also plan for your long-term goals and how you're going to be getting that job or developing your business. Then Q2 over here says what is important and urgent. Those are accidents that you can't plan for. Those are accidents you don't know are going to happen, like a fire or a car accident. Yes, it's important. Yes, it's urgent, and you have to take care of it, but you're not planning to do those things. Anything that's not important, you learn to say no, or you will only do it after these other things are finished. So let's take a short break, no more than a 3-minute break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk more about this stuff. We've just had a break. We're talking about Korean and Japanese management. We've been talking about how Japanese management is very focused on planning and very focused on their image. They'll have the long-range strategy, the short-range strategy, the medium-range planning that we've been talking about. All of that impacts the performance of firms. Not just the long-range and short-term planning, but because everybody is involved in the Japanese planning, everybody can make suggestions to the CEO, and the CEO listens to every other person in Japan. Some people say it slows down the Japanese economy. Is that true? Has Japan's economy always been growing fast? No. Any comments about that? There was a lost 2 decades. What exactly does that mean? When did the lost 2 decades generally start? In the 1990s, yes. What is generally happening? When did Japan really start to grow? Recently they started to grow, but a long time ago they started to grow when the car companies started to sell the cars to the whole world. And then they also started to grow when the Sony Walkman was started to be provided to everybody around the world. What happened before Japan really started to grow? What was normal management? Normal management was the North American huge luxury cars for a huge price. That was the only thing you could have. Japan came out with new, lower levels of technology, but everybody could buy it. And since that's the East Asian management style, selling many, many products for low profit, that's definitely a Chinese characteristic, right? You sell many products for low profit versus the Western style, you sell a few products for high profit. So when Japan started to sell the cars, they had billions of possible customers. They grew really, really fast. Same thing with the technology with Sony. What was the Sony Walkman competing against? Before the Sony Walkman came, I don't even know if you were born yet. Boy, I'm getting old. But before the Sony Walkman came, what was the standard? What was Sony Walkman taking business away from? Maybe the old cassette tapes or the big plastic vinyl records, right? And those huge TVs and the huge radios. They had radios this big as this box, or as big as this box. And if you wanted to listen to music, you had to turn the radio on, which was this big just in your family living room. It sounded beautiful, but it was very, very expensive, like $2,000 easily for just the ugly radio. It's not even a TV, just a radio this big. And so the Sony Walkman came out, and it was small, smaller than this. And it would be for $100. And that changed the world. That management style, where you sell many, many products for a very, very low price, you're changing the world. You go from having 100 customers, or maybe in the West, you have 1,000 customers or 100,000 customers, but in the Eastern style, you're looking at all of society, all of the planet. You have billions of possible customers. So they're growing like crazy. So what happened? After everybody had the Japanese cars, and after everybody had these small Walkmans, there was not really much else to do. They didn't have these new technologies for quite a while. So Japan basically stopped. Since the Walkman, what is a new technology related to fun and entertainment? Video games, great. So since the Walkman in Japan, which changed the world, we had video games. What were some of the biggest video games? Generally, it was the Microsoft in North America, so that was growing for a while. They do have the Nintendo and the Wii system, that helped, but that's been one of the only big things that's come out of Japan in decades. So start thinking of this new type of technology, the new type of management products, and how it works with, in East Asia, they sell many, many, many for low price, versus in North America, you'll have a few sold for very high profit margins. That makes a big impact. And how does it change the world? You were saying that you had a couple of comments. What did you identify with this?
So, Professor mentioned before, like when the car industries grew, like it grew rapidly in starting 1990s, 80s, and then it grew, and when the Sony Walkman and the car industry was like all done, like in 2000, like the growth like slowed down, and then after that they're growing again recently.
Great, thanks. As we can see here, we see there's the, in 2000, there was the big dip. You guys know in 2000, it's famous for the .com area. Just before 2000, all companies were trying to grow really, really fast. And everybody thought Japan was the leading edge. .com is when we had the beginning of animation and a lot of the video games starting. So online business was growing really, really fast. But then in 2000, there were so many companies like Facebook and Twitter that has been just placed on the stock market in the last 48 hours and is growing like crazy, growing really, really huge, very, very fast. But at that time in the 2000s, people thought that was the best business in the world. Everybody started to make a new business. But what's the reality? Anybody could make a website, which means anybody could make a business, which means almost everybody did. And people thought since you had a website, and it sounds kind of cool, people were investing in the stock market for you with lots and lots of money. But then very quickly in 2000, they realized, well, that was kind of stupid. He's just a young guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And the business didn't really work. So all of these companies crashed. There was the .bomb. Recently, what we do see is there is a trend towards East Asian growth. And with East Asian growth, United States is kind of afraid of the Chinese growth. They're going to be too big. Korea is a little bit small, so they're not really too afraid of Korea. So they've been promoting the Korean businesses, whether it's online or the Japanese businesses, to diversify against the big bully coming from China. That's the Western view by some people. So competitive advantages in the world market. 1950s and 70s, there was the low-cost manufacturing, as we were talking about. There was the increase of wages. Japanese developed the comparative advantage. The Japanese companies had cutthroat domestic competition, strong international competitiveness. Generally, remember again that Japan was at the family style or the social community style of growth. So Japanese companies were paying people very, very low amounts, just as they were doing in China. Is that all you should think of? No, because versus in North America, where they pay you and they don't care about your health insurance and they don't care about your housing or your clothes, in China, for example, they have to give you housing and they have to give you uniforms, and many of them still give these free workers lunch and things like that. Just like here, universities. Has anybody been to a university outside of Asia? A North American university? The cafeteria, the foods there are probably very expensive. Versus here, the foods are almost sold below cost because there's the government subsidies. Those are very big differences. And the pay is the same. When the low pay in Japan was used to grow the country, after the country became rich, everybody wanted the high pay, and then as soon as you got the high pay, people sort of became lazy and a little more complacent, things slowed down. The exact same thing is happening in Korea. Korea in 1960s, 1965, what was the average pay? $100 a year was normal for everybody. What was the average pay in even the 1990s? Maybe $5,000 a year. And now what is the average pay? From the 1990s till now, it's growing incredibly fast. Many people are expecting at least $20,000 or $30,000 a year as average. And since you're getting rich And since so many people in Japan and Korea got super rich with the high-tech .com companies, everybody's got a lot of money to spend, and so they're getting a little more relaxed, a little more comfortable, they're not working as hard, and the economies are starting to slow. Does that make sense? The more money you have, the more comforts you have, the less you have to torture yourself to work hard. I can't say when I was young, it doesn't really apply, but when regular professors in Korea were young, they had to study maths and engineering and sciences super, super hard. Do you have to study maths in Korea today? No. When did that new policy start? The idea that students no longer have to study maths hardcore is a very new policy. It's just started recently because the money, the wealth that everybody's had has been so good, they're starting to be more relaxed. Less on work, more on enjoyment, more on playing sports with young kids. So Korea's economy has been slowing a lot. Same with Japan. What's happening in China though? Do Chinese people worry about playing sports and soccer and baseball or swimming lessons for the young kids? Absolutely not. The country is still on average very poor, so the country, all workers in general, still have that burning desire to get the comfortable lifestyle, so they're working very, very hard, and maths and sciences are generally the safest, fastest, best thing to study to be prepared to grow. It's very, very nice to study Greek mythology. It's great to study the arts of some dying civilization, but those generally don't get you the jobs like maths and sciences and the management skills can get you. Make sure you understand that, so those competitive countries are using those desires and the hard work to grow. China is still working hard, studying the most in the world. Up until a few years ago, Korea was working super hard, but now people are getting their parents to send them to these study schools, but then skipping the study schools to play the video games, or talking in the study schools, the hagwons, with their friends. And that's some of the reason why Japan slowed down so much and Korea slowed down so much. Make sure you're aware of how those things work. The financial strategies. In the 1950s and 1990s, Japanese companies overwhelmed the competitors with their products. As we said, in reality, it represented only a group of Japanese companies from the same industry flocking to the same strategy. Anybody want to name some North American foods? North American food companies. If you start thinking about North American food companies, almost all North American food companies are controlled by maybe 10 companies or less. Coca-Cola owns many different drinks and foods. Pepsi owns many different drinks and foods. Kraft, General Mills, other than that, you have Procter & Gamble and Unilever. Those companies are just a few companies controlling almost all of those popular products. Almost all of the products. So just like in Japan, a few companies grew the whole country. It depends what you're focused on. If you see, for example, in Africa, you'll have a lot of countries growing very, very fast with GDP. And so people say, congratulations, African countries, you're growing very, very fast. That's the place to invest. But if you look very, very closely, there's only one or two companies that are actually there. And they're oil and gas or mining companies. They go in and they might be taking this gas, and all that takes is one construction drill operator to put the drill into the ground and another person to take the pipe the gas out, and then it's taken to a different country. So that company makes billions and billions of dollars, but there's only a few workers. So that company gets a lot of sales, and it's going through the country, so the country has billions of dollars of growth, but only a few people have benefited, exactly as you have identified, Ingyu. So with your management, it's good to understand that people talk about these big companies like Procter & Gamble or Sony or Toyota or Samsung and Hyundai, but most of the jobs are where? In all countries in the world. More than 90% of all jobs are in the small and medium-sized businesses. So it's best for you to plan to have your own businesses. And if you want to gain experience, you can gain experience in the East Asian companies, but understand the concept and how it works back and forth. A big part of the Japanese system is JIT. What does JIT stand for? Just in time. Anybody want to explain it?
They're basically thinking that unused inventories, like storing them, is kind of waste.
Mm-hmm.
So they produce right amount of goods in right amount of time. So like if there's more efficiency.
Yes. Some people might not understand the details of that. I can simplify it. I love real estate. If you really want to have a very strong financial future, learn about real estate. Learn about how almost everybody in the world wants to get into the stock market. The hottest thing in the stock market right now is what? In the last 48 hours? Twitter. Twitter has now just come onto the stock market. Before Twitter, what was the most recent hot stock market story? Facebook. Facebook grew like crazy. It took university students like you guys and made them billionaires overnight. Twitter is doing the same thing. What is interesting about Twitter? Anybody know how Twitter is managed? Anybody know how much profit Twitter has? Excuse me. Twitter is getting something, they plan to get something like $10 billion with the stock. But they're already up, I think it's either 20 or $40 billion they've already got, and they haven't even finished that first round of IPO. What is interesting about Twitter? It's never made a profit. Ever. It's always making a loss. And yet going on to the stock market, they're making billions of dollars. So it's interesting for you guys to note that you guys have the potential to make business like that. You're plugged into the growth area in East Asia. You're plugged in with the culture, which is the Confucian culture and the East Asian loyalty-based culture. You're plugged in with the technology all the time. Make sure you take advantage of that, and you will be the new Rockefeller or the new Andrew Carnegie or the new Vanderbilts. Just like when they invented steel and they invented oil, you guys can invent those new futures here. So with real estate, it's very, very important. It relates to it. We're talking about just-in-time inventory. If you don't understand the idea of just-in-time being good, think of it as a company. The company has these products. They want to sell these products. They have to bring them into a store, but especially in East Asia, you have to have a store room. You have to have a place to store it. So to buy or rent space is very, very expensive. So if you have 1,000,000 of these or 1,000 of these waiting for customers, you have to spend a lot of time on the rent to hold it. But can you do that in Seoul? Where is some of the most expensive real estate in the world? Here. Gangnam, yes. And Tokyo. These areas with the world's most expensive real estate, you can't have this space waiting for somebody to take it. So you only have one here that you're going to sell today. And tonight, the delivery man is going to come and give you another one for tomorrow's sale. And tomorrow night, the delivery man is going to come and give you another one. That's just in time. So the business is doing the same business. They're giving the products to the customers the same as they always did. The only difference is they don't have to waste money on that huge rent fee. That's one way to understand it, that just in time. It's just coming in time to be sold. And again, I talked to you about how North American companies, they would take, for example, 60 days to make a car. And then all of a sudden the Japanese companies came around and Toyota was able to make a car in 2 days. Same thing. You don't have to waste all of that space with not just the rent, but you don't have to waste the space on all those people working. You can just make many, many more products. Is it just cars? How does this relate? We talked about the Sony Walkman. What about computers? Technology with management, for example, we had mainframe computers coming into the world. That came in, mainframe computers, about the time Bill Gates and Steve Jobs started to come around, especially the mini computers and the workstations. After that, then we had the personal computers. Soon as they started to come in, that's when Steve Jobs and Bill Gates were generally young kids. They started programming in schools. That's how they started to grow. And when the companies are being managed, initially, a small little computer is only worth a few $100s. It was expensive then, but it's only a few $100s. The big business was IBM. And IBM making the big business was that mainframe computer, the size of this room. Huge. How much did that cost? Millions of dollars. For example, it could be $2 million for the one mainframe, and the profit was $1.2 million profit. And so they focused on this while new companies came in and they were selling this smaller thing, like the mini computer. And the mini computer was being sold for the same, for much, much lower, hundreds of dollars, and maybe $70 profit. Like the laptop. You might be able to get a laptop for a few $100s, and it's just maybe $100, which is profit for the company. Same with the smartphones. Smartphones, you might be able to get a smartphone for $200, and it's $70 profit for the company. So when the companies that have been around for a long time, who should you be working for? Is the question that Ingyu was asking. Which companies might be good to work with? Those companies that are big and famous, making those big, famous, expensive products, might be killed by the new companies that are coming in, making it cheaper, making it more easily available to everybody for a lower price or free. So mainframe computers were big and expensive, lots of profit. They don't care when a new company comes in and makes the smaller computers for a smaller profit. That's just a headache anyway. So we're going to focus on this, but those businesses are gone. They're dead. How does it impact you? Sure, what's your question?
I remember, and I recall your statement, like you said, if you produce something, if you produce a product and sell it cheaper, you said it's not a good idea basically, it's just for you.
No, don't misunderstand. When we're talking about general business management, you'll have people that will make the two exact same products. And you can try to compete and say it's a little better quality, or you can compete and say it's a lower price. Just competing with a lower price with the exact same product is dangerous. That's not what I'm talking about now. What I'm talking about now is the companies that are managing, the total management focus is we have this huge product, very luxurious, very expensive, and there's these new things that are not competing with us, like a mainframe computer does not compete with this computer. This big box computer, people make this. It does not compete with this. This costs thousands and thousands of dollars for this big box computer. And they don't worry about selling this too much. That's why they don't compete with them. They allow these small companies to sell this because it's small margins, small profit. But because they're selling billions of them, these companies are now growing, and this company is now gone. That relates to education too, in my opinion. All of these theories, I encourage you to read Clayton Christensen. He created books called Disruptive Innovation and Emerging Innovations, Efficiency Innovations. It's very, very interesting to read those books. I believe it also applies to universities. Universities generally make an education, big, expensive, 4-year project education. Is there anybody competing with universities? Online courses or colleges. Generally, they don't compete with colleges because colleges are just small, little 2-year programs. So they don't care about that. A lot lower price tag, and they don't have the specialists. They don't have that profit margin, so people just focus on this. If you only keep focusing on universities, colleges will probably continue to become more and more powerful because people must come to get trained for new jobs. If you have a degree but don't have a job, people usually go back to a college to get trained for that special job. Colleges are going to grow faster and faster, more so than universities in the future, especially as people get older. But more importantly, as you said, now there's free classes online. This class can be free online. And so if these classes are free online and the internet gives information about everything, the whole idea of this free, huge Harvard education, like a Harvard MBA, costs easily more than $100,000. But almost all of the classes, the same content, is now free online. And Harvard's not competing generally with these online classes, so some people think Harvard's going to go bankrupt. Make sure you understand those concepts when you're picking who you're going to be working for in the future. Look for that new trend that's coming in and is displacing things. Usually it's cheaper and it's being made more simple for more customers. We talked about the just-in-time. We talked about the total quality concept. Japan is also super famous for total quality control or total quality management. An organization is trying, like Toyota, to always focus. Everybody is responsible in the Japanese organization to improve the quality anywhere, anytime they can. And that fact is one of the reasons why Toyota really, really grew fast. There's an endless drive for high quality and low cost, always throughout the organization. I'm going to skip past the summary and get into a couple more things. Getting into Korea and Japan share a couple of features similar to the Walt Disney movie, The Lion King. And we're not going to be getting in trouble with Walt Disney, but I have to definitely promote Hakuna Matata. What does Hakuna Matata mean? In class, I talk to you, you have to know this, that horse style or the Gangnam style, that helps with marketing. That's one new way of thinking, but what is Hakuna Matata? Hakuna Matata means descendant from heaven, yes. So on the exam, if I ask you, what does Hakuna Matata mean? You can get answers for saying descendant but from heaven, but what does that mean? And what is the actual correct spelling? It's not properly Hakuna Matata, but it's close. Can you say that a little bit louder? Can you make a couple more comments about what it is?
So it's involving a triangle, golden triangle system, which is this slide shows.
Here's the golden triangle. We'll talk about the triangle later, but first you're talking about this. Yes?
So it's basically about like going circle within the society. Then, for example, retired professors so they go to government officials. Then when they retire from government officials, they go to big business CEO, something like that, I guess.
Yes. So there is a triangle in Japan and in Korea. The triangle is made up of government workers, which are considered the top of the hierarchy. Society in East Asia is generally a hierarchy. You have government rulers ruling all of these other ruled people. Inside here, you have the father over the son. So there is that hierarchy that you have to follow. In this hierarchy, government is generally at the top. And then there's the businesses, and the top universities are also very, very high. Like Samsung sometimes is above the government. You guys are aware that the Samsung CEO, everybody in the country knows they're guilty of a criminal crime and are supposed to go to jail. But they're so powerful to the country that they don't have to be punished. They just have to keep helping the country, and they don't get punished for their crimes. So sometimes the government is number one, sometimes business is number one, sometimes universities are number one. And as you said, Kumaderai or Hakuna Matata is what? What does it mean with the Lion King movie or this triangle? What exactly does it mean? Where is heaven? Yes. Sometimes we have, if I erase some of these things, you'll have the businesses, you'll have the universities, and you'll have the governments. All of these are considered the top of society in all of East Asia, right? There's almost nothing more powerful than the biggest businesses, nothing more powerful than the biggest government workers, biggest universities, and nothing more powerful than the top government employees or the top government people, like the presidents, etc. So, who are the biggest businesses in Japan? Sony, yes. Toyota, yes. Honda, Mitsubishi for sure. Does anybody know of some of the main top organizations in Japan? Mitsui, okay. Sumitomo, Mitsubishi. Okay, those are huge companies. So they basically control most of Japan. If you are part of those, first of all, what are they called? They're not just a mom and pop shop. Zaibatsu? Okay, and what is it called in Korea? Sorry? Chaebol, yes. Actually, which one started first? Zaibatsu or Kairitsu? Zaibatsu started first. And when were they replaced? When did they become illegal? World War II. World War II, they became this. Because this was 100% family controlled. Just a few people controlled it, and it's not good for the country, according to American generals in the military. So the American military made this illegal, and they said you had to break up so everybody could share in the wealth. So they broke it up so many people could invest, but the reality is that these are still controlled generally by these big families, just like in Korea. What are some of the biggest chaebol in Korea? Samsung. Samsung? Hyundai? Oh, I just heard something that I got to jump on. Hyundai is Kia, right? The world definitely doesn't usually know it, but Hyundai is Kia. Of course, LG or SK are important. This, as we were talking about, was illegal because all of these Zaibatsu were controlled by just a few companies. So America came along, and America took over, they won the war, they made a new law, and they said you had to go onto the stock market and get investors so everybody can invest. Anybody know what is the stock market for Samsung now?
300.
It used to be 300 many years ago, like 10 years ago, yes. $1,000, over $1,000 for Samsung stock. And LG is generally still around $600, right? Hyundai is approximately how much? About $200 now. Yes. These are artificial values. They can be changed anytime. And you can manipulate these anytime. Later I'll show you a slide, and it talks about how the ownership now looks like a spider web. It's all over the place. Generally, it's still controlled by the same powerful families, but anybody can invest in them. Now let's get back to Lion King, Hakuna Matata, descendant from heaven. Universities. Who are the top universities in these countries? Sure. Tokyo University. What are the top universities in Korea? Sky, yes. Seoul, Korea, and Yonsei University, right. So these are the top universities, and you guys are here because you know anybody that comes to this university has a much better chance of getting a job than any other universities. What about in the government? What is the name of the government in Japan? Yes. So you're aware of the governments. So descendant from heaven again. Hakuna Matata. What does that mean? When somebody is working with these and they finish working or they retire, they're still super valuable, right? Because they have this Guanxi and they have the connections and they know this art of war. So you grab these people for the connections from here and you bring them into the businesses. Or the Zaibatsu top companies come into the university or go into the government. So it's not coming down from real heaven. It's basically these are heaven-like organizations and they retire from here and go take some sort of image-related role in the other organizations. And it goes back and forth. It's a triangle. Governments want the people that were from the top universities. And the governments want people that were top executives in these businesses. Same thing, the businesses want people in the businesses that were with the top universities. Or they want people in the businesses that were with the government before. So that's what we mean by descendant from heaven. Make sure you're aware that there's a special term for the businesses, for example. Here, what is this all called? In Japan and in Korea, there are different words for it. You don't just say business, because business can be pojangmacha or a mom and pop shop. It can be a street side vendor. But these are not street side vendors. Conglomerates is one word for it in the English word. The Japanese word and the Korean word would be slightly different. There's generally an association of them. Our word that's identified in business here is the Keidanren, or the, there's a special word, I'll race you to try to find it in the book. In Korea, it's called the Cheonggyeonreon, or the Federation of Korean Industries. Keidanren, that's what it is. Here, it's the, Keidanren is the association of the top businesses in Japan. In Korea, it's the FKI. And again, FKI stands for what? Federation of Korean Industries, or the top chaebol. They're an association of those. So anybody that's in that top association of chaebol is super, super valuable. Anybody that's in this Keidanren is very super, super valuable in Japan. Make sure you know those words. Make sure you know that triangle like this. Anybody could be at the top or any part of these. It's generally just these three members go to each of these areas. And the Hakuna Matata, or as we see here, Amakudarai. It's talking about how that's super, super important. Understand how it relates, again, to the art of war. You're working with your enemies, right? And the Guanxi, you're working with your enemies. For example, businesses get the best students from the universities. And if they have very, very good relationships with the universities, the smartest people in the country go to the best universities. And if you have very good relationships with those universities, you convince your students to go work with those companies. So if the university tells all students that's the best job, that company, regardless of the product, is going to be successful because they have all of the future brains and the talent are going to be going there. Next, what are the relations? Business relationships in Korea. It's generally government domination for a long time. It's starting to change nowadays. You guys are aware, if you want to get a job in the government in Korea, what do you have to do? Most people will study for many years for that government exam. You pass that exam, then you can get an interview. That's supposedly one of the hardest things there is in the country. Compared to that, it's the law exam or the medical exam to get into these programs. If you do any of that or get into the top sky universities, your future is generally set. It's safe. So with the government domination in Korea and in China and in Japan, it's important to understand It identifies those. Why it's important is because the government says which company can get special loans and which companies can make new laws. And if the government makes laws, they're going to make laws because of lobbying and ideas from these businesses. So if you want to make a new business that's going to pollute the whole world, most governments would say, no, that's impossible. But if you have friends in the government, maybe they're going to make the laws that allow you to manage that way. It identifies priority industries for investment, raises investment funds, controls bank credit, tax administration. How did Korea grow? North America grew and it took 100 years. Japan grew, it took 70 years. Japan and Korea have big differences. One difference is in Japan, all of these businesses have their own bank. All of these top businesses have their own bank inside the business. So the credit is made by them. But in Korea, how did Korea grow so fast? The government had banks, and the government controlled the credit. So you want to grow fast, the government says, we're going to give 0 interest for anybody that wants to use money if you're going to make nuclear power plants, if you want to develop that. Or we'll give you 0 interest for anybody that wants to make cars. Surprise, surprise, Samsung makes cars, Hyundai makes cars, almost all of these companies make cars. Because they were getting free money from the government, and the government was saying to do that. And because we have that hierarchy again, if the top person says this is good, you do it, right? That's the favoritism. Is that bad? Is it bad to play favorites? If you own a company, if you are Chung Ju-young, the guy that started Hyundai, is it bad to think about giving the company to your kids? North American people say that's bad. What do you think? I would tell you, I would honestly, definitely think, I want my kids to take it over. If I can control it, I will definitely try to give it to my kids, if they can do it. Heck, I'm already rich. I've already lived my life. I'm going to die soon. Look at me, I'm old. My responsibility is the loyalty, right? And there's nothing more important with loyalty than your family. Is that a bad thing? North American people generally say, yes, it might be bad. You should have the best individual to do the job. But in Korea, they have the family. It is changing, as we've identified, and they're going to hire more and more professional people to do the job. But the first choice goes with the Guanxi. The first choice goes with the family. I think it's human nature. Does anybody think it's better to have just professional, 100% professional managers? No? Who thinks that Apple should be given to just some other person not related to your kids? What about Bill Gates? If Bill Gates has a son, should Microsoft go to Bill Gates' son? Or should it be for the whole public and let whatever CEO the world invests or votes for, should that be the new person? It's something to think about. In East Asia, very, very different. There is a huge trend for what I think is a human need. You protect the people around you. You protect the community around you. So you can't have a happy son, or you can't have a happy daughter, you can't have a happy family if the city hates you. So you still have to take care of the community also. So favoritism is still important here. Useful material. Here is something that we're talking about. I don't know if we have too much time to talk about this. Anybody want to make comments on this?
Turn from agriculture to industrial, he emphasized that we should.
So Korea started to grow from these huge companies that were changing from farming, and the government cleared the farmers' debt. They took care of them so we could have cheap food for all of the workers in the factories that were making industrial products. like the cars and the shipbuilding companies. But that was many years ago. That's what made Korea grow. But now that Korea has grown and Korea is rich, we have to change again. So what is the new focus for the government now? Or, same question, what are these companies focusing on now? Renewable energies, and biotech, and service industries, knowledge-based industries. What is knowledge-based industries? Google Analytics, Facebook Analytics, SciWorld Analytics, Kakao Analytics, YouTube Analytics, all that stuff. Make sure you're aware of that because that's what is being promoted in the future. That's what almost all businesses are going to require. When did the companies start in Korea? In Korea, generally it's the 1950s, self-made founders. Anybody can describe the development of Samsung and how the development of Hyundai was different? Who was rich? Who was poor? Or who was middle class? Samsung was rich, yes. The Samsung family was also the high-class family, like the Yangbang family. Where were they educated? Internationally, right? They went outside of Korea to get the world's best education, which in the 1950s was basically in Japan, and then they came back with the Japanese technology. As you're going through adult life, studying your books, you're also outside seeing these companies grow. So you see, the best companies have these big, crazy new machines. So these Samsung guys go to the universities in Japan, see the Japanese equipment. After they graduate, they bring this equipment back to Korea, and that's what made Korea grow. They started with the government-owned properties. They had the tax preferences, grants, special incentives, special loans. That all led to very, very rapid growth. The role of the chaebols. What did the chaebols do? They were supposed to diversify into many different products and markets. They thought the safest way to grow was through diversification. So the top chaebol had everything. Same in Japan. There was the large private corporations. They were generally monopolistic power. They had the control all of their own of the economic wealth. However, if they didn't have the art of war understood, if they didn't have the Guanxi understood, if they basically got very upset with the government, for example, what happened? Daewoo was a good example. When the Asian financial crisis came, all companies were facing bankruptcy because every one of the top chaebol had borrowed so much money from the government. The reality is the government just gave them money for free, but now the government was bankrupt and the government needed money back fast. So the government was saying, you're a friend, Daewoo, you didn't vote for me very much. Daewoo, give me the money back today. And these companies would be destroyed. So you must understand how the art of war and the Guanxi still play a good role in management. This applies to your jobs too, right? Where do you want to get a job? Who do you want to work with? Who are the people that can help you? Start thinking about that, plan that for your future. There is a summary. We're going to skip through some of the summary. We understood, as we said already, the Zaibatsu were from the late 19th centuries. They were up until World War II, the end of World War II, they were made illegal. They were vertically linked business groups, which are generally the same thing that we have today. But they say, Keiretsu, from the 1950s to today, they say it's horizontal. However, it's still linked with the cross-shareholding. In Korea, it's different. They're more similar to the Zaibatsu because it's still absolutely family-controlled. What's the family that runs Samsung? Lee's. But some people say the Lee family only has like 4% of the Samsung electronics. So you're crazy when you say the Lee family controls Samsung because he only has 4%. What is your response? Yes, it's smoke and mirrors. It's manipulated. They have 4% of the direct Samsung Electronics. But who owns Samsung Electronics? An amusement park, Everland. And the family controls a lot of Everland. And a lot of the investors in this amusement park are other companies. And they own controlling interests in these other companies. And through this web, they can control these companies. Who controls Hyundai? The Jung family. Jung Ju-young, he died, right? And who is taken over? His sons and daughter, right? Don't forget, it's 2013, and then we have the women here. Come on, women, you're allowed to kick their butts. Who are the actual people, the children of the founder of Hyundai, Chung Ju-young? The children are who? What are their names? And who is more powerful than the other? Yes? Chung Won-jun is one of them. In general, they are the guy has the most powerful position. The Confucian ideology, the Confucian thinking was the oldest son usually takes most power. But even then, this was recently, and even he has started to change, and he gave some serious power to his daughter. And the daughter has started to grow very, very valuable businesses. And that was several years ago. Today, it's changing even more. So make sure you understand that there's the family pressure, there's the loyalty influence, but more and more people are hiring people based on their qualifications and their abilities. So, family members. As I talked about earlier, family is very different. In Japan, we have the household or the clan or kin, K-I-N. It's the concept of family not only based on blood, but also on adoption, on basically loyalty. You've been with the family, helping the family for a long time, so you're considered a member. Since the succession of property in Japan is often based on the concept of an heir or a son that's going to be inheriting things by blood, the main objective is succession is to protect the wealth of the family. In Korea, family is generally related to blood. This is 2013, almost 2014. It was just recently that women in Korea could not own land. So even if I wanted to give a business to you, the woman could not own land a few years ago in Korea. Only the father or guys could actually register land. And women for a while in Korea were owned by who? Women were considered property. Who generally is the owner of women? Yura, I'll ask you. Get ready for a fight. Who generally is considered to own women traditionally? Not today. Today's have changed for sure. Own women. Women were considered property in Japan, China, and Korea of who? Not the government.
Husband.
Not first.
Father?
Right. First it's the father owns the daughter, and then when the woman gets married, her ownership gets switched to the husband. What if you're married to him and he dies? Who owns you then? In the past, not anymore. Married? Oh, marry again. Go for that girl, what is it, the sugar daddy, right? Terrible management. It might be smart, it might be reality, but I'm not supposed to teach that. Seriously, there was the three owners for women traditionally in East Asia. The father, the husband,
King.
the son, the first son. The wife was supposed to be serving the son, or the son was supposed to be taking care of the mother after the father and the husband have died. She basically becomes like an orphan. If she doesn't have that, traditionally it was very, very bad. That's why so many families were trying super hard to have sons. That's why we have more sons. That's why traditionally we had more sons than girls in Korea, more guys than girls. That's why today, 2013, some of the guys can't get married because there are not enough girls. And they have to import, I'm talking too much about products, too much about management. They have to import the best souvenir in the world, a wife. Thank you very much. My wife is from a different country. But yes, well, life is changing, management is changing, but things have changed. That's one of the reasons why guys might be in rich families, but guys are getting so comfortable, they've always had everything, they're being outplaced and outmaneuvered and replaced by girls. Because girls still have that burning desire to work hard and become powerful that guys no longer have. Guys take it for granted, they're complacent, they're getting a little lazier, and more girls are getting better jobs than guys nowadays. Guys, be careful. Those girls are kicking your butts. If we look at the class records and evaluations, it might be interesting to see what's happening. So, the concept of the family member. We already talked about these key features of the large Japanese business groups. The 4 largest zaibatsus, as we said, Mitsui, Mitsubishi, Sumitomo, Yasuda. I believe this comes from several years ago. You are aware of these big companies nowadays. They might be changing. Any comments about any of these? Get those smartphones working. Make sure you understand that several years ago, the 4 largest zaibatsu, when were the zaibatsu around? Before 1950s, up until the World War II. Right. So at that time, just the 4 largest ones controlled 25% of all Japanese businesses. They had so many different subsidiaries and spin-offs and like Samsung. How many businesses does Samsung own? Hundreds, right? Everything. What does Samsung make? They make smartphones for sure. What else does Samsung make? One at a time. They make electronics, yes? They make insurance. What else do they make? They make apartment buildings. Great. What else do they make? Come on, we're in Korea, you're Korean, or you're based here, you know these things. They make cars, they make ships, they make clothes. Samsung started how? From food, right. They make everything, right? So make sure that you're aware of those things. There's so much diversification, it's interesting to see how it's spread out around. The earliest companies, the earliest conglomerates in Japan, they benefited from that diversification and the government auctions of the state enterprises in 1880s. The Japanese government with the zaibatsus evolved into large groups with 3 to 4 decades, which were the karetsu. So the zaibatsu was controlled generally like this. There's the owning family, and there's the holding company, and then they have many different small subsidiaries underneath. And after the war, they thought it would be fairer to divide this up. So after World War II, 83 zaibatsu holding companies were forced by the military governments to change and break up. After the war, the Japanese government allowed the zaibatsu to reestablish relationships with banks of their former groups, but none of the old families regained their original ownership and control on paper. They had to use the cross-holder shareholding. So we have the keiretsu. There's these new legal organizations. After the war, Japanese business groups, they had interlocking ownership patterns. The member companies of the cross-owning of the stocks with other groups within, they basically had stocks that controlled the company. So they can control other companies that can control the target company. The governing bodies, or the presidential club, or the board of directors, for example, were very, very important. The presidents of member companies with mutual ownership of the stocks, the Guanxi, was very, very important. Each group is organized around general trading firms, international trading companies, it's a spelling mistake here, and major banks. Make sure you're aware of that. Japan and Korea grew with international trade because they were making a bunch of things and selling it to the world. The government were promoting you to get money from the world and bring it into your country. You had to do international trade. You had to export stuff and get the money from abroad to bring in. So the new structure looked like this. The Keiretsu, they say it's a star, but it's not a star. It's more like a spider's web. You can't really see all of the connections. It's all over the place. It's sticky. You don't want to get involved. Who knows? What's that Japanese mafia going to come and slice you in two with a ninja sword? But it's like this, and everybody is aware of this. Group member companies control and influence ownership and operation of the subsidiaries. So there are comparative advantages. Of course, they have the stock holding of the other companies. So if my company is doing very, very well, but my subsidiary, my partner company is not doing very, very well, I can loan them money so they can grow. Or I can give them all of my products and accept they will pay me later. Basically, they get free money or free products, and they will grow that way. There's a lot of stability with that cross-shareholding and support. The joint businesses among the members within the group is a significant means for promoting the group cohesiveness and keeping people participating together. What's different in Korea? In Korea, we have the chaebols. It's almost the exact same thing as the Keiretsu. They're comprised of many affiliated companies. Each of the 10 largest chaebols controlled on average 18 corporations many, many years ago. In general, they were saying that the top chaebol in Korea, the top conglomerates, have more than 100 subsidiaries. Chaebol groups are much younger and smaller than the Japanese Keiretsu. Most of them were established during the 1950s. Many of them are still owned by the founders or the founders' members. So what does it look like? It's almost the same. You have the owner's family and the subsidiaries, and when that owner dies, he gives the subsidiaries to the family members. Daewoo, for example, you can see the owner family, the holding company, and then the subsidiaries of Daewoo. Samsung, you'll have the owner's family, and then you'll have the holding company. For example, the Everland, which nobody really looks at, that controls a lot of Samsung. And you might have the Samsung Electronics, which is very, very valuable, but it is controlled back and forth with these amusement parks. Surprise, surprise, you have a zoo controlling the biggest companies in the world. Key features of Korean business groups. They're family controlled. More than 30% of the executives of the top 20 chaebols were family members. Where did most of those top family members, where do most workers, not just today, but 20 years ago. 20 years ago, if you wanted a job in the top chaebol, which province in Korea did you have to come from? Around the Busan area, right. Almost all of the top businesses, universities, and governments came from that area. If you're looking at the Supreme Court judges of the country, almost everybody is coming from that top university. Be sure you're aware of those details. The owner families of the 4 largest chaebol, Samsung, Hyundai, it's now no longer called Lucky Gold Star. It's very good information for 10 years ago, but today it's just LG. And Daewoo, what has happened with Daewoo? Sorry? Daewoo has been split up into many different parts. Don't forget, they still have a huge operation. Like Daewoo Shipbuilding is still huge. It's the largest in the world. But the car version of Daewoo, yes, it was sold to other foreign companies, like GM Daewoo. As the size of the chaebols grows, there was increased share of family ownership. Professional managers are being said they're increasing family ownership, but it's still relatively new. Make sure you understand the more international education you have, the more international language skills you have, the more valuable you will be to these corporations because you're viewed as more of the professional people, characteristics. You are better qualified than just the locally trained and educated applicants. Key features. I've already talked a lot about this. I want to make sure it's very clear. Ownership structure used to go to the eldest son because of Confucian family relations. But the eldest sons have now definitely been changed. You guys are aware of what is most important nowadays? Yura? Ingyu? Would you want to guess what is most important for operating these businesses now? Proper management, period. You will want to try to give it to family members or relatives, but you cannot pick a family member that's not very intelligent if there's very clear proof that more intelligent professional people can do the job. Family have an advantage, but it's not absolute anymore. Same thing with the daughters. You can have a lot more women in the top management. Make sure you're aware of these details. Here's an article. One of the last things I'll talk about is extra videos or articles that I think you guys should read. One of the articles I think you should read is an article talking about how Samsung was made. Most people, they think of Samsung and they say, that's Korea, that's our country, yay, Korea. Or Urinara, Urinara. Or they go, 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 Korea, 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 equals Samsung, Samsung, Samsung. But how is Samsung made? What is Samsung's management style? Yes, it has the family ownership, but there's generally, it's made from input from one area and input from another area. Yes, Japanese management style and a lot of Western management style have been brought together to make the existing Samsung style. Some people say it's more Japanese than Korean. Most Korean people will never say that. But people that just look at the facts, especially outside of Korea, they may say it's more Japanese than Korean. Why? Why would you say Samsung has Japanese management style? Yes, it was made by a guy that was brought up and raised and educated in Japan. And he was made, the company was made with equipment that they took from Japan to Korea, because Korea was very poor. They had nothing when they started. So they got the old equipment from Japan and started. So they had to operate it copying the Japanese style and following the education that they learned in the Japanese style. And as they grew, they realized that North America was promoting a different management style, so they tried to promote and copy this American management style, so that has impacted a lot too. Think of those SSCI articles, that would be very valuable. Okay, I will summarize this quickly, but in general, we're almost finished, and in 2 weeks we're going to be talking a little bit more about the technology, a little bit more about Korean-Japanese relations, and we're going to be getting into negotiations. Everyone here, please make sure you review getting to yes. You must show me at the beginning of next class what is the definition of BATNA. B-A-T-N-A. What does that mean? Make sure you're aware of that so we can talk about how to negotiate well. And while you're talking, all of those answers should be available by the other students that are managing that chapter presentation. So hand that in at the beginning of class, and the TAs will be recording those marks. Have a good break. See you.